Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. I'm Suman, your host for today. I'm a program manager at the Policy School in Takshashila. As you would know, the two main areas of work at Takshashila Institution are policy research and policy education. As part of policy education, we run courses of different durations and in different areas of specialization. We have the advanced public policy course, we have the defense and foreign affairs, as also the tech and policy course. What is special about today's episode is we are joined by a student from our current cohort, Shailesh. Welcome to the show, Shailesh.
Hello, Suman. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Quickly, can you just start with a short introduction for yourself so that our listeners know something a little more about you?
Sure. So I'm Shailesh. I'm a fourth year law student in Christ University, interested in labor law and public policy. Like Suman stated, I'm also currently a student of the GCPP course in Takshashila on advanced public policy.
Okay. I'd like you to just, as a law student, what made you pick up this course? Because you learn enough of law, right? So what made you pick up the GCPP?
Yeah, ever since my first year, I think I've been deeply interested in sociology and the public policy aspects of law. So to gain crash course on other aspects such as economics, for example, I wanted to pursue this course in Takshashila.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Okay, just to give context for all our listeners, at the GCPP, the Graduate Certificate in Public Policy, which is a 12-week course, while we focus on policy analysis and, all other aspects of policy making, starting last cohort, we have also begun talking about engaging with the community as policy analysts, as policy watchers. How should we engage with community? And we are also studying how better we can communicate, how better we can engage with our immediate communities in our areas of work or where we stay or anywhere, any area that for that matter. Yeah. So as part of this community engagement exercise, Shailesh has done some very interesting work. So I will first ask him to summarize or give us a short intro into what he's done as part of that work, and then we will go into details. Shailesh, can you tell us just like 3-minute intro about your community engagement exercise?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, this little project was conducted as part of the community engagement exercise, which was an assignment of the GCPP course. So, as part of the exercise, we were supposed to conduct interviews with a specific demography in society to try and assess some concerns they face and how they may be addressed through public policy. So I chose street vendors because they are a section of society who are so prevalent. I mean, we come across hawkers every day, and yet they are so neglected by lawmakers and the government. And I specifically chose to interview female street vendors to try and gain an understanding on how different their concerns were in relation to their male counterparts on whom there is some amount of literature on. I specifically chose fruit and flower vendors only because they are immobile or stationary. They usually vend in one place, while vegetable vendors happen to be mobile, right? And this retains some homogeneity in the project. So overall, myself, along with two friends adept with Kannada and Tamil, surveyed 10 female street vendors across 3 different localities for this project. And we tried to assess some of the problems that they face and also some problems distinct and unique to female street vendors, such as harassment and more stringent socio-cultural norms. And I wanted to explore these issues and document them.
Great. That's very interesting that you brought firstly the street vendors, because we never talk about the marginalized section. And in that, to bring in a gender issue is really good. Thank you for doing that. Just to get into the methodology as such, could you take us through what the questionnaire involved? What was your interviewing technique? Did it involve a questionnaire, or was it just a freewheeling interview?
Yeah, it was a free interview in a certain sense, but we did have a set of questions that we prepared to go in with. So these questions were borrowed from other surveys conducted, such as the National Family Health Survey and the IHDS. And the questionnaire that we prepared was essentially split into 4 parts. So we asked questions regarding their identities and backgrounds to establish the demographic. We then asked questions about their finances, and then we asked questions about their well-being and quality of life. And lastly, we asked questions related to street vending in itself, such as the goods they sold, the source of the goods, price hikes, impact of the pandemic, etc.
So, Shailesh, can you just take us through what this whole street vending, what it involves? I mean, as consumers, we are only privy or we only see one part of the street vending activity, but there is a lot that happens behind the scenes. So, if you could just take us through what it involves, what is the scene, an overview of stuff of the street vending activity itself in Karnataka, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, street vendors in the country have always faced an upward battle when it comes to protection of their livelihood and their rights and interests, right? Their right to livelihoods, which is generally protected under Article 21, was always up for judicial scrutiny with the rights of other stakeholders, such as residents, taking precedence. So, this resulted in widespread social insecurity, a lack of agency, and their rights being recognized. So, in light of all of this, and in light of a struggle for rights and protection of interests by unions and public advocates, the union government enacted the Street Vendors Act in 2014, which sought to provide statutory recognition of their rights and to regulate vending and in the country. And it also mandated the implementation of state rules to regulate and protect the rights of the same.
Okay, so this mandate has come from the union government. Now, this is a very very local issue, so I'm really suspect about something that gets thrown from the union government down to the municipalities. So, are there variations in the law when it comes to state-wise? Who is implementing this? The state. I'm guessing the state governments, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Uh,
state governments or even the local governments, for that matter. So, what happens there? I mean, of course, the broad direction may have been given by the union government, but what are there specifics to this in Karnataka or Bangalore or whichever way you
yeah.
want?
Yeah, I mean, as you stated, the broad direction is given by the union government in the Street Vendors Act in 2014. For instance, Section 12 of the Act recognizes the right to carry on their occupation, and the Act deems any eviction that doesn't follow a 30-day notice period as being illegal. Chapter 8 of the Act states that no vendor who carries his occupation in accordance with the Act shall be harassed by the police or any other statutory authority. So, all of these rights and the powers to regulate them in committees which were to be set up by the state. So these town vending committees were to be set up in each local authority by the appropriate governments under the act, and they're responsible for a plethora of functions. So they are to conduct a survey of all vendors in the area every 5 years. They are to issue certificates of vending to the vendors in the area, thereby providing legal recognition of their right to carry out the occupation in the area. And these certificates would also be important to avail schemes and other benefits provided by the government, which I shall touch upon later. The town vending committees were also to declare holding capacities, which is the maximum number of hawkers in any one zone. So these committees clearly had many powers and functions, and it was imperative that the respective state governments implement the rules of the act so that they can be set up. And that brings us to Karnataka. So the act was notified in 2014, like I said, but the rules for the act, while drafted in 2016, was only implemented in 2019 after the High Court basically chastised the state government, for notifying the rules, for not yet notifying the rules. So in 2019, the town vending committees were set up in Bangalore, but they were only set up in 7 out of the 8 zones. The Bomanhalli zone still does not have a town vending committee. So elections were conducted and members were thereby inducted into the town vending committees for the 7 zones. But all of this happened after a 5 year delay. A lot of other rules remain unimplemented also. For instance, the survey that was mandated by the Act to be conducted by the TVC every 5 years has not been conducted at all. Additionally, the town vending committees were supposed to provide certificates of vending, like I said, but very few vendors in the city have received any. For perspective, only 3 of the 10 vendors that we surveyed had been issued any certificates of vending. Other
Okay.
rules like the grievance redressal commission, for example, was not implemented, and the state government is yet to implement a scheme for street vendors, even though the act mandates that the state government do so within 6 months of the act itself, which was in 2014. So overall, we can see a bunch of shortcomings in the implementation of the act and the rules, which impact every aspect of street vending in the city.
Yeah, just a small deviation from here. I mean, how
Yeah.
many of the people that you surveyed were aware of their rights as street vending, as part of the street vending, association or whatever? Like they're not to be evicted without a 30-day notice. Do any of these people know of their rights? That's a question that we need to ask right at this point.
Yeah, we saw a massive lack of awareness when it comes to their rights and interests. Apart from the 3 participants who did receive certificates of vending, the 7 other participants were not aware of a town vending committee in itself or many other schemes related to their protection of rights and interests. This was also made clear to us in a conversation that we had with the head of the Street Vendors Association in Karnataka, who spoke to us about a lack of awareness amongst the street vendors themselves regarding these schemes and institutions.
So does that mean they're not organized? Like they don't have a union or anything like that? I would imagine.
There is a union for street vendors in Karnataka, in Bangalore. In fact, there are multiple unions for street vending in Bangalore. However, none of the participants that we surveyed were part of any union.
Okay. That I think comes to, all of this actually points to something that we study in our GCPP, that is state capacity, right? We can have all the laws and they can be written very well, but if we don't have capacity to implement the laws and rules, then it would mean very little, right? So, yeah, for our listeners, if you are interested in studying state capacity, studying functions of the government, economic reasoning for policy, etc., we have our next cohort opening on September 3rd. You can apply for our courses on our website, school.takshashila.org.in, and you can be part of the next cohort to learn all these important concepts in public policy. Yeah, at this point, we'll take a break. Shailesh, we'll come back after the break to discuss a few more things on this. Welcome back. I'm joined by Shailesh, who is a student of our current GCPP cohort. And as part of his study on community engagement, he has studied street vendors and also a few other schemes that affect street vendors or, everybody on a larger scale. The next, we studied street vending. We learned about the street vending aspects before the break. We'll move on to the public distribution system and what he has found in his study on the public distribution system. Shailesh, can you summarize for us, the study on the public distribution system?
Yeah. So maybe you could start with an overview of the public distribution system in Karnataka. So the PDS in Karnataka is governed under the National Food Security Act, with rations provided to members possessing a ration card under one of 4 different categories. And the categories are based on income earned and states the maximum allotted grains that members of each category can avail. And to apply for a new ration card the procedure is slightly contested. So since 2017, an Aadhaar card has been mandatory to apply for a new ration card. However, additional prerequisites to apply for a ration card has been contested, with contradictory and possibly outdated rules being followed. According to certain sources, an income certificate is required. According to certain sources, a proof of residence is required. And all of this would be relevant when we look at certain problems faced by the vendors that we surveyed. So we categorize the vendors in 3 different groups. One, the problems faced by ration card holders registered in Bangalore. 2, problems faced by vendors from Karnataka with no ration card. And problems faced by vendors who happen to be interstate migrants. So vendors from Tamil Nadu, for example.
Okay. Yeah, that would be, given if you're asking for a proof of residence, that would be a dampener for, for anybody
Yeah.
who wants to permanent residence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is it for? I would think the people who already have a ration card will face the minimum number of barriers, or relatively speaking, with the others, they would face the minimum problems. But what are these problems that they actually?
Yeah, I think it is fair to say that problems faced by ration card holders registered in Bangalore are slightly lesser than those faced by vendors outside, but they still face substantial obstacles themselves. So the 3 concerns that they raised were the timings of the fair price shops, the quality of grains, and the lack of types of grains distributed. So the fair price shops run by the government tend to have very arbitrary timings while being closed for most days of the month. So these timings are not announced in advance, and 2 participants stated that they were forced to visit the ration shop every day in the hope that they were open. The participants also raised concerns regarding the quality of grains being issued, to the point where one participant spent 4,000 rupees on food supplies for the month of for her family of 3, even though she had access to rations due to the poor quality of grains being distributed. They also spoke about the lack of types of grains being distributed. So Karnataka is supposed to provide rice, wheat, ragi, barley, and sugar in their fair price shops. But the participants complained that the shop seldom provided grains apart from rice. And this was cited by one of the participants who spent 5,000 rupees on a month, a family of four, on food supplies, even though she had access to rations. So essentially, they faced problems regarding the timings and the quality and lack of grains distributed.
Okay. So timings, you think it's just a management issue, or is it they don't have enough supply, so they don't open the shops?
So we asked ourselves this question as well. So we decided that to corroborate these findings, we need to survey fair price shops on our own. And so we surveyed like 3 fair price shops that were government run and not run by a self-help group or a cooperative society. And they yielded some very interesting findings. So one of the stores that we visited was closed, and we later found out that it was closed for the rest of the month, with a poster announcing that all allocated grains for the month were issued. The dealer confided in us that the store was open every evening from 12th to 18th of June only, which means only 6 days in the month. So, and she said that 1,000 cards worth of rations were issued in the same period. We asked why she did not place a new order for grains to the godown, and she stated that while she could have done so, she only deals the original amount of rations given to her every month. So this points to a lack of political will or a lack of will to
Okay. The
implement this scheme.
incentives, I mean, why would
Yeah, exactly.
why would she do something if she's not required to do? Yeah.
If she's not required, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that is a big lacuna in government-run fair price shops. You're saying.
Yeah. We also found other concerns regarding fair price shops. So the dealer in the first store that we visited stated that he had very limited knowledge on the working of the store. So he did not possess any knowledge on the system at large, the grains provided, or the technical requirements for data entries. And the second store, the second store that we just spoke about, she also additionally confided in us that she takes home 10 kgs of rice for her family every month from the allocated rations. So like,
Oh my
we thank her for her
pilferage.
honesty. Yeah, we thank her for her
Yeah.
honesty, but it paints the system in a very bad light.
I know.
And
Yeah. So aligning the incentives of the agent to the principal is important over here. That's
Correct.
an important concept, right? That we have,
Correct.
I mean, we've always been stressing on, which is missing over here. So you can see it playing out in different ways, in different forms, wherever we go. Yeah. Go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah,
Mm.
I mean, we see significant leakage, we see a lack of competence, a lack of will, and policy failure in accounting for human errors and self interest in the system. And any policy must account for those two
Yeah.
things, particularly.
Yeah. Go ahead. Other findings from just the fair price shop.
Yeah, other findings, we also had visited a third store where we found that rations were being provided and there was a notable crowd, but the dealer refused to accept any application for new cards. So this in turn affects those problems faced by vendors from Karnataka who do not have a ration card. And those problems are the second category of concerns that we documented. Essentially,
those-
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, so we are moving to the second category, that is street
Correct.
vendors who don't have from within Karnataka who do not have
Karnataka who don't have a ration card.
ration card.
Like,
There would be documentation problems,
yeah,
like
yeah. Documentation problems was the primary problem that they all pointed out. So, a participant, for example, stated that while she desires access to rations, she was denied a card due to not producing a proof of permanent address and a proof of ownership of property in Karnataka. And similarly, documents such as an income certificate is very hard to procure for informal workers without a pay slip to verify their pay, right? So, according to the guidelines issued by the government, no document is required apart from an Aadhaar card, but the participants state that this is not being followed and that additional documents are being asked for. So, this leads to heavy exclusion and points at a lack of good implementation and awareness of the beneficiaries. The information that was provided was very contradictory from many sources, such as the government itself and third parties, such as cyber cafe vendors.
sure. Yeah. So we will move on to the next one. I mean, are there anything else that you want to add on to this?
Yeah, I mean, apart from the lack of information regarding the documents that are required to avail a ration card in itself, there is also the whole system seems replete or seems to be bred with corruption and bureaucratic red tapeism, right? Because according to the aforementioned guidelines, a card can be issued from centers such as the Fair Price shops or Bangalore One offices or online for a cost of 50 rupees and an additional delivery cost of 70 rupees. But one participant stated that she was asked for a fee of 5,000 rupees to process the application and therefore could not avail a ration card. And these bribes have been demanded in the district taluk offices that issue income certificates, as well as other centers that issue ration cards themselves. Additionally, while none of our participants face the problem of an Aadhaar card being mandatory to avail a ration card, there are numerous studies that point out at how exclusionary the requirement of an Aadhaar card to avail rations is. And even recently, there was an article about how the Aadhaar card is probably responsible for multiple deaths due to
Malnutrition or
exclusion from the public distribution system.
Yeah. So I think, we are again dealing with the concept of efficiency. You want to make the system efficient. You want to ensure that only people who are really deserving get, and therefore you bring out all these kinds of cards and entry, barriers for availing the scheme, etc. But what happens is you end up making different kinds of errors. You make up exclusionary errors, and that causes a lot of other problems. So all this feeds into the design of the policy, thinking about the design of the policy frameworks, etc. Going to the last one, which is, I think I would imagine that would be the most difficult set of respondents that you would have faced in terms of interstate migration, given
Correct.
that there should be free movement of people across the country. Nobody should face a problem, but it appears that it's not so. So what are the specific problems faced by people from other states, interstate migrants?
Yeah, indeed. Interstate migrants have for long been ignored when it comes to access to rations and the public distribution system. And that's very significant because you will find that most of the vendors in Bangalore are interstate migrants, especially from Tamil Nadu, but also states like Telangana. So 6 of the 10.
Just a quick interjection. When you say interstate migrants, do you mean that they come in here just to send their wares and go back, or are they here for a longer period of time?
No, they have resettled to Bangalore to carry their occupation of street vending.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so like I said, 6 of the 10 vendors surveyed migrated from Tamil Nadu and had ration cards registered in their state. And they raised the following concerns. Again, the application for a ration card in Bangalore being very difficult because migrant vendors are also confronted with the problem of proving residence in Bangalore, right? So even though all the migrant vendors had an Aadhaar card, the Aadhaar card registered their hometown as a place of residence, and they did not have other proofs of residence in Bangalore. And this automatically invalidates them from availing a ration card in Karnataka. But more significantly or more interestingly, there was also a strong desire to not cancel the ration cards registered in Tamil Nadu. So every migrant vendor that we surveyed had a ration card registered back in their hometown in Tamil Nadu, so that dependents could avail rations using the same. However, even if no rations were being availed by dependents in their hometown, they still chose to not deregister their ration card in Tamil Nadu. And upon further questioning, we found that this was due to various reasons, prime of which is the relatively wider and more efficient public distribution system in Tamil Nadu, with a higher quantity and different categories of grains being provided. Additionally, there are other incentives attached to possessing a ration card in Tamil Nadu as opposed to Karnataka, which includes substantial housing subsidies. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
So it discourages them from.
Exactly.
So,
But
what is the way out?
Yeah, but this poses a very unique problem because what happens to migrants, both sets who want a ration card but were declined one, and those who don't want to deregister the ration card in their hometowns. So the problems regarding food access to migrants has long gone unaddressed, and we saw the consequences of that during the first wave of the pandemic, for example. And this is really concerning because some studies show that it is migrants who require the most support from the state. So
Yeah.
recognizing the same, the union government announced the One Nation, One Ration Card scheme in 2019, which has now been implemented in all states. Now, according to the scheme, beneficiaries under the NFSA can avail rations in any state, regardless of the state registered in their ration card. So, theoretically, migrants can avail rations no matter where their ration card is registered at. So, the grains are distributed across districts and states through a framework termed as interstate and intrastate portability under the NFSA, and they are required to record all portable transactions on 2 portals, namely the IMPDS portal and the Annavitran portal. But we found severe problems with the implementation of the scheme.
Okay. Which is, can you just go a little into the detail?
Yeah, I mean, for starters, our survey of the 3 fair price shops shed light on the implementation of the scheme. So when asked about whether they provide rations to migrants, The dealer of the first store stated that he did not have any knowledge pertaining to the scheme or the provision of rations. And the dealer of the second store expressly stated that she does not provide rations to migrants. She stated that while she was aware of the scheme, she does not do so as it would mean keeping track of another category of grains and price slabs, and that it would be quote unquote risky, by which she was referring to the sophisticated process of applying for portable grains and recording these transactions. Now, these are very significant problems because it shows a lack of clarity and awareness, not only by the beneficiaries, but the dealers themselves, right? So even if
Yeah.
potential beneficiaries are aware of the program, they're denied rations by the dealers, and that just goes completely backwards to the legislative intention of the scheme.
True, true. Yeah. So we see this playing out very differently when it comes to the implementation itself, right?
Implementation. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Do
did.
you,
I'm so sorry to interject, but we did some more digging, and we found that the data registered on the two portals, as well as the Ahara portal run by the Karnataka government, simply do not match. For instance, the IMPDS portal recorded 71 kgs of rice from Tamil Nadu being sold in Karnataka in the month of June 2022, sorry. But there were many instances of repeated entry of the same sale. So, thereby implying that the actual quantity is lesser than 71 kgs. And the website
okay.
run by the state government in Karnataka has totally different entries and a different quantity of grains procured. And that website shows that 150 kgs of rice were being sold in Karnataka from Tamil Nadu. So, I mean, ideally, the data from the two portals should tally, but it doesn't. And that implicates the government, for it could highlight problems of fraud or lack of technical expertise and training, etc. And the data also highlights the problem of low coverage of these interstate portability transactions in the first place. So let's see. I mean, assuming that the data on the state government website is reliable, which says that 150 kgs was being availed, it wanes in comparison to the amount of rations that could be availed by potential beneficiaries of the scheme, right? To
Mhm.
contextualize this number, 11,647 quintillion tons of rice was issued as ration in Bangalore in the month of June 22. That's 11,647 quintillion tons of rice as opposed to 150 kgs of rice. So that just,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. It gives you the scale of the
exactly
problem.
the problem. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So to conclude, I mean, I understand that from what I get, from what I hear from you, is that all is not good with the public distribution system. And, your study has only brought this out further and in the forefront. I wish, I mean, of course, this is a smaller sample size, but I wish somebody takes this up and does a larger study out of this. But this is a fantastic study to give us a sense of the problem that prevails. As privileged individuals, relatively upper class, all of us, I mean, most of us, or most of our listeners too, may not be availing of the PDS system. And we are blissfully unaware of the problems that come associated with it. Yeah, I hope this has given everybody some food for thought to think about, the problems that people face while availing basic services, as well as problems in implementing or thinking about a policy solution to any problem that we have. Right. So, would you like to just conclude in terms of your key takeaways from this project that you did? What did you like most about doing this project, and what are your key takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, more than anything, it provided very interesting glimpses to a demographic, to a whole section of society that we rarely interact with except for an exchange of goods and services, right?
This is
And it gave
very
us
transactional.
very transactional, exactly. And he gave us very interesting findings, not only in the public distribution system, but also in their financial aspects of their lives, their income and expenditure, the exorbitant amount of interest that they pay on loans, and the debt that they in turn are affected by. We
Yeah.
also, yeah, we also like encountered some truly absurd schemes such as the PM Swanidhi scheme, which completely fails in implementation due to inbuilt absurdities. We encountered problems such as harassment, which is unique to the female street vendors, both in private and public scenarios. They raise concerns about security and housing, water and sanitation, medicine and healthcare, and a lot and many more. So these are findings that have to be explored to a higher extent with the larger sample size and documented further.
Thank you so much, Shailesh. Thank you for doing this survey and thank you for coming on the show to share your findings on this. I hope more people actually give this a thought. I think it's something that we all can do something about. Thank you for being on this show.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.